Hey, welcome to Tune In Economics, Homeschool Edition, the class that invites you to master AP Macro without ever stepping into a classroom. Today's topic, macro stabilization policies. We're talking supply, demand, and financial shocks and the fiscal and monetary policies that are trying to tame them. Brought to you by Joel Hernandez and me, Elizabeth Salinas. So anybody who tells you that economics has nothing to do with real life has not been paying too much attention to everything that's been happening in the last month. Only 1 month ago, in the good old days, in February 2020, we were at the full employment level of GDP. What did that mean? That means that everybody who wanted a job basically had a job, that we were at the natural rate of unemployment, that the economy was strong, that people were making money, that they were buying things, that firms were selling things, and that is macro equilibrium. So then came COVID-19. This was a supply shock with an epidemic that started in China. And what happened was that factories, of course, had to close. And because we have so much of the world's production based in China, with raw materials, intermediate goods, and final goods all being produced in China, this is a tremendous disruption for firms in their production process. So supply chains are interrupted, and what that means is that firms are not able to keep up their same level of production. So what they're able to produce and sell is now less. Short-run aggregate supply shifts to the left. We were at the full employment GDP, and now we're at something less than the full employment GDP. And this is a recessionary gap. You'll notice that it has upward pressure on prices, and everybody wonders what's going to happen next. What happened next was a demand shock. So COVID-19 starts to spread rapidly, people are told to stay home, and people who are at home are not spending anything. So firms are not making anything, and this is a demand shock. Remember that aggregate demand is made up by consumption spending from household, investment spending from firms, government spending, and net exports, which is exports minus imports. So with everyone at home, aggregate demand has a massive shift to the left, and we can see again, this is the real GDP level moves to a less than a full employment output. So again, this is a recession. We can see in this example, in a demand shock, that there's downward pressure on prices, whereas with a supply shock, there's upward pressure on prices. We don't know what the inflation rate is going to do, but what we do know is that financial markets are really going to react to this. So financial markets, which are uniquely susceptible to panic, investors start looking for a safe place to put their money. And in a recession, people tend to take their money out of the stock market. There's a massive sell-off. We see stock market prices going lower than they have at any time, for example, during the Trump presidency. As people try and take their money out of the stock market, they tend to want to put it into someplace safer, which is the bond market. And so because of that, there's a lot of demand for bonds. Bond prices are going up, but bond yields, or what you're really earning off of a bond, is going down. On the other hand, this also makes sense. People who are worried about the future tend to want to buy gold, and we see gold hitting the highest prices that it has in record highs. So in the money market, in finances, and the federal funds rate, we see that the rate that banks lend to each other, the overnight rate, has also gone down to the lowest level that it has. This is sort of an approximation of what happened in 2008. We were down here at about 0.25%, and we've reached that low level again. Now, in oil, we see Russia and Saudi Arabia, who act as like a duopoly. Saudi Arabia representing the OPEC nations, they start an oil price war at the same time. And what that means is plummeting oil prices. You can see this is represented by a kink demand curve here, which is kind of the sell-off that takes place when two players in an oligopoly type market start a price war. It's bad for everybody. You would think that falling oil prices would be good, but a lot of countries that depend on oil, like Mexico where I live, are very hurt by that. So oil is at its lowest price in the last number of years. Okay, so what happens? What's the response? The first response comes from on the monetary side, and that makes a lot of sense because the Fed is uniquely set to act quickly. They don't need to pass a bill to get the approval of the president and Congress. So on the monetary side, the Federal Reserve pumps a ton of money into the economy, and what that does is we can see the increase in the money supply. It shifts to the right. The amount of money in circulation is increasing. The interest rate, the nominal interest rate, is dropping. The Fed targets a lower federal funds rate. They do that they don't exactly set the federal funds rate, but they do that by increasing the money supply. The only thing that they do set is the discount rate, but what they did is open the discount window, so that allows for large commercial banks to borrow from the Fed. We have to ask ourselves, with all this money being made available and market's not really responding to it, are we in some kind of liquidity trap? And what that means is you can lower the interest rate to zero, but you cannot make firms or banks borrow that money. So monetary policy becomes ineffective in a liquidity trap. So that leaves it up to fiscal policy to come in and try and do something, which the President and the Congress have been working on. So the fiscal policy response is a massive increase in government spending, which we should see coming out in the next few days. This is because consumption spending has dropped and investment spending has dropped. The government comes in and starts pumping a lot of money into the economy with the hope that we can start to close that recessionary gap. Also, on the monetary side, the lower interest rates from the Federal Reserve should help consumption spending and investment spending theoretically, because at lower interest rates, it makes their big ticket items more affordable, and firms could be more incentivized to borrow money to start to do investments and things that they do. So here we see an example of the fiscal and the monetary side trying to work together in this really unprecedented kind of triple threat of the shocks that we've had. So we here at Tune In Economics would like to propose our response, and that is for you to stay home, stay calm, learn econ. We're going to get through this, you guys. Tune in next time when we ask the question, how fast is money? And find out how monetarists answer with a confusing equation. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.